Is this working? Okay, hello. Does the microphone sound okay? Oh, can you hear me yet? Okay, whatever. Okay. Um, it's a little blurry. Oh, the camera? Okay. Well, while we make adjustments and figure everything out, hello. This is Game Center Live. This is our talk show where we go over mundane school announcements as well as analyze industry news with a very sarcastic, cynical perspective that you should associate with NYU Game Center. And we'll also be featuring special guests. So just as a quick preview, later today, we'll be featuring Bennett Foddy, who's faculty here at Game Center, but Bennett's currently on sabbatical. So we'll talk about what sabbatical means exactly. We'll learn about what Bennett's up to, and we might play one of Bennett's favorite games. Who knows? So first, let's go over some school announcements. Yay, school announcements. Okay, so first of all, Playtest Thursday is happening as usual tonight because it's Thursday. Oh, what's wrong with my phone? It's 5:30 to 7 p.m. as usual in the 6-4 lounge. So if you're an NYU student or if you're a member of the New York City Game Developer Public, come hang out and eat some free pizza and test your games and get some good feedback. Another reminder to some Game Center students, help desks are still running, and please make use of help desks. We've expanded code help desks this semester. Code help desks are running every day, 1 to 5 p.m. So please come debug your stuff and troubleshoot all your code. There's also other help desks for 2D art, 3D art, writing, and I think that's it. I feel like I'm forgetting a fourth help desk or fifth help desk. Apologies to whatever help desk I'm forgetting. Next up, if you are Game Center alumni, the Alumni Social is happening tomorrow, 7 to 9 p.m. At the understudy in the DeKalb food market. So you know that big bougie food market where everything's kind of expensive? The one kind of decent bar in downtown Brooklyn is also in that bougie food market. It's called Understudy. That's tomorrow, 7 to 9 p.m. Hang out, reconnect with your old classmates, share gossip, and all that good stuff. Also, if you know of any better bars in downtown Brooklyn, please tell me. People are always curious to know where else we can go. Not that Understudy is bad if you're watching Understudy. Let's see, what else? More news for Game Center students. The Cross NYU or 370 J Street Undergrad Social Hour is happening next Wednesday, next week. So that's October 2nd on 370 J Street, 4th floor. So students from our neighboring departments, such as recorded music or REMU, as well as IMA and IDM, will be there. So other undergrad students. So if you're an undergraduate student at NYU Game Center, please go hang out there. Again, that's next Wednesday, October 2nd, at what time? I don't have the time on there. Look on the poster for the time. I can't see what time that is. Oh, 3 to 4 p.m. So there's will be free pizza, ping pong games, and it's also a good opportunity to meet up with potential collaborators for your projects. Next announcement, our favorite DIY punk games gallery, Baby Castles, located around Union Square, is premiering their new exhibition tomorrow, Friday, September 27th, and it's called Year of the Pig, and it is celebrating the Lunar Year of the Pig with games and installations by mainland Chinese, Taiwanese, and Hong Kong indie game designers. So check that out. It's premiering tomorrow at Baby Castles. Tickets are $5 to $15 on a sliding scale according to your ability to pay. Visit babycastles.com for more info. More news. As a reminder, GDC Summit submissions are due. They close at the end of the month, September 30th. If you're not familiar, GDC summits are like mini tracks that usually happen on Monday or Tuesday, and they cover more specific stuff like AI or level design or tools. There's a tools summit, believe it or not, or narrative summit, all that good stuff. Those submissions are closing at the end of this month. So make sure you get your submission in. I actually just turned in my submissions yesterday. So make sure you get them in. Keep in mind the submission form is kind of long. It's like at least like 1,000 words or so when you fill in everything. So make sure you get started on those things early. Next up, another call for proposals. QGCon, or Queerness in Games Conference, is happening again this year at Concordia University, May 23rd to 24th. So they're looking for new submissions for talks or workshops, and those submissions are open until October 15th. Visit qgcon.com for more info on that. And as usual, Game Center exists on the internet. We'd like it if you followed us or liked and subscribed or whatever the kids are doing these days. So you can visit our website at gamecenter.nyu.edu. We are also on Facebook. Just search for NYU Game Center. And we are also, of course, on Twitter, where the rest of the game industry is on. Just search for NYU Game Center on Twitter. And we also have a YouTube with over 100 videos by famous, influential, important game industry people. So please check out our YouTube archive for a lot of great videos and talks on that stuff. And I think that's the end of our announcements. So now we'd like to move on to the next segment that we like to do on Game Center Live, which is about where we cover the door was locked, which is where we cover industry news. And let me unlock it. Where we cover industry news. And my co-host in this is Naomi Clark.
I'm going to sit behind the sign again.
Oh gosh, let me move. Let me change my overlay. There we go.
All right.
It's going okay.
Yeah.
How are you?
Not too bad.
Cool. Again, we're sharing one mic. We're gonna get these really cool clip-on lavaliers eventually.
Yeah. Once we make lots of money from you guys liking and subscribing. No, that's not actually the way this works.
No, I don't even know if you donate to this Twitch channel. I actually don't even know what happens to that money or anything. Shh.
Don't tell NYU that there's a revenue stream here.
Okay. So yeah, this segment is tentatively called In Other News with Naomi Clark, and this is a segment where we go through the industry news of the past week and give our very cynical, sly, fun commentary on those news events, so that we can tell you what to think, so that you can sound smart at parties. So let's go ahead and get into it.
We just got some French news going on. Is that what's on the screen right now?
Yeah. So this was actually big news that happened a week or two ago. So yeah. So what happened was the French courts actually made this ruling that Steam has to let people resell their games. So the headline originally is Steam, Valve est condamné en France pour avoir interdit la revente de jeux dématérialisés. Dematerialized games. Imagine that.
Yeah, basically what we would call digital games, probably, right? But I think we should maybe switch the English terminology to dematerialized games. It sounds way more like something somebody would have made up for Dungeons and Dragons expansion.
Yeah, definitely. So Naomi, what do you think is the effect and importance of this, or is it important at all? What's going to happen?
Well, so I think it's interesting. It goes back to long conversations that have been happening for a long time about the big difference between buying a digital software product and a packaged software product. Since you buy a game or any piece of software on a CD, you have this physical thing, which by law in most countries, you can sell to someone else. I could take my copy of Suikoden 2, very expensive.
I'm playing Suikoden 2 right
Oh, you are? Well,
how do you know I'm playing Suikoden 2?
Well, I didn't know that. I was just trying to think of the most expensive game I own, which I think is Suikoden 2, because it's like you can buy it on eBay for like $500 or something, right?
Oh, shit, wow.
But you're playing an emulated version?
Yes.
Yeah, I have an actual CD, right? So I could sell it to you for a bunch of money, and then I would give you the copy, right? But with a digital game that only exists in digital form, usually all you have is a license to play that game, and that's what the French courts are calling into question. It's actually something that some consumer advocates in games, a term which normally I'm a little skeptical about, but in this case, maybe there's a point, like, well, should you only have a license to something that you paid for? Is that like a sketchy move on the part of industry to like not actually sell people things? So the French courts are saying, look, you have to allow people to sell something that you bought them. If it's a product, it's not really a subscription, I think, is part of this court decision. And they're relying on EU laws, right? So although this decision only affects France, actually they're sort of relying on the larger body of law that applies to all of Europe. So it could have bigger ramifications. I think right now, what you had looked into this, it's if they took the fine, like what would happen to Valve?
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of the math, where I believe the fine is, where's my mouse cursor?
It's €500,000.
It's €500,000, and if you convert Valve's annual income, it's like 4 billion euros or something a year.
That as well. So 4 billion in revenue, 4.3.
4.3.
Right. So it's important to keep in mind, like, although that sounds like a drop in the bucket, 4.3 billion in revenue doesn't include all of Valve's costs, right? Like paying all those people to work on Half-Life 3 or whatever that they're doing in like a secret warehouse somewhere. Probably not. And also, it depends on the business division, right? So if this fine has to be paid by, I don't know, Valve's European division, do they even have one? Probably not.
Probably in Dublin,
So
somewhere.
someone has to pay this. It has to come out of somebody's revenues. That's probably a subset of Valve. So it could actually hurt them more than you think. And the last paragraph of this story here actually notes that they did make some changes to policies when they were facing a fine of something a little bit more, $2.4 million. So I don't know. What would Valve do? They could change it so that anyone affected by this court decision, which might be everyone in Europe, can resell their games, which would, let's think about the impact of this. That would be terrible for game developers, probably more than anyone, since 70% of the sale price goes to game developers. And if suddenly everyone in Europe was just saying, well, why would I pay you, the game developer, for this game? Instead, I'm just going to buy it from someone else, from my friend or something. And then that represents a huge loss of income for game developers that might put a lot of people out of business or drive people away from selling in certain types of stores. I don't know. It's way too soon to tell because this is going to be held up in court for years, whether it's going to have any impact. But if we imagine a world in which this did become standard, where you have to be able to resell any game, my prediction would be that it would push online stores and people selling all these new online stores, right, towards different kinds of models, which are more like buying a subscription. We already see that with other types of software packages, right? Everything is subscriptions now. You can't just go and buy the same kinds of Microsoft Office or Adobe software or whatever that you used to. And new, smaller, more indie software companies, they don't even have the option of buying a copy anymore, right? You have to buy a subscription to your email organizer or whatever productivity software like that, and apps or more apps with subscriptions. So it's a very tricky, delicate ecosystem. Like all sorts of weird, bad things could happen as a result. Because do you really want to buy a subscription to the Witcher 5 or whatever, and then lose access to it if you stopped paying $5 a month?
Speaking of subscriptions and stuff, here's another news item I saw where Google As you might have heard last week, that Apple launched their Apple Arcade stuff, right? Which is a subscription premium game service. And of course, Google has done kind of the bare minimum to respond to this. They have announced something called the Play Pass game and app subscription, where instead of getting exclusives, they kind of just looked through their existing library and then made that available for a subscription, which doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not sure who would pay for that. So, what's your take?
It's sort of laughable, right? But the funny thing is, well, this must have been in the works for longer than a week, right? They, at some point, some executive at Google or in the Google Play or Android somewhere heard about the Apple Arcade and were like, okay, we got to do something. And then the people at Google did not have enough time to respond to Apple's move, and so they threw this together rapidly. What's really sad to me is that they put it out just a few days after Apple, right? If they had thrown together this cheap version and then did it 2 days before Apple, I would be like, oh wow, you completely sort of tripped them up. But they're doing it afterwards. It's like you're like just sucking their backwash. It's pretty sad. Google generally, I think, knows even less what they're doing with games than Apple, right? And they're going to try to roll Stadia out. I think that's going to be a big thing in October. Nobody quite knows what that's going to look like yet. It might make no sense at all. It might really change things. Nobody knows. But if you look back at Google's history of making decisions that affect games or like trying to launch game services, it's not so good. It's sort of like a weird afterthought. There doesn't really seem like there's anyone high up at Google who really gives a shit about games.
Yeah, among game developers, there's been buzz about Apple Arcade for a while. People not really necessarily breaking their NDAs, but people have been talking about it for a long time. Right. But with Google Stadia, I actually haven't really heard anything from game developers.
Well, they definitely made some big high-profile deals, like with Ubisoft, to do some things like that, right? And they've been approaching people that you and I know, maybe even some Game Center students and alumni, to be on Google Stadia. But I don't know whether anyone's taking those deals or how they're structured. Google certainly has a lot of money, so once again, as with Apple Arcade, it might be this sort of situation where it's like, yeah, if Google or Apple are trying to recruit you to have a good starting lineup to launch their new service, then yeah, get that money. That doesn't mean it's actually going to be a viable or a good idea a year later for anyone else who comes along and wants to launch games. So we just have to keep an eye on it, I guess, and see how this weird new tumultuous period shakes out. This happens every so often in games. Don't be afraid. I don't know, try to ride the wave. If you are coming out with a game, see if you can find some way of turning it to your advantage. But yeah, anything could happen.
So get that Google Stadia money. Get it. Another news item I wanted to talk about. Speaking of money, so this kind of caught my eye on Eurogamer. Eurogamer reports that Counter-Strike and Overwatch esports teams are under investigation by the Australian police for links to organized crime as well as match rigging. And I don't know about you, but to me, this is the first real sign that esports are real sports. The fact that people are gambling around it and cheating a lot and there are high stakes. Now it's like a real thing. Now we're in the big boy leagues. What do you think, Naomi?
Yeah, I think there's a good argument to be made. Actually, I think organized crime has gotten involved in games. They really started getting involved in MMOs. Maybe were the first digital games I remember hearing about organized crime getting involved in, right? Because you could steal items or like set up shady transactions. Oh, yeah. There was somebody who was murdered, I think, at some point in Korea back in the mid 2000s because of something related to a shady MMO transaction. Oh, yeah, maybe it was Lineage or something. I don't remember the game. I shouldn't probably say because you'd be like, don't associate murder with my brand. With Lineage, you think maybe they would want to associate murder with their brand. Yeah, so does this make it a real sport? I'm not sure. I think really when people say, well, like, are esports real sports yet? There's two answers. One is, sure, of course, like we don't need to define sport super strictly. And then the other answer is, of course not. Because when people say, can we be a real sport? What they really mean is, can I be really famous and to be a hero to kids and to be accorded the social respect of like an NBA player? and get all of the perks associated with it. So esports players, I think, are getting closer to that. They're getting big, contracts and merchandising deals, right? And probably there are kids. Yeah, I'm sure there are kids who are like, I really admire that person. But there's still a gap between like an athlete in a non-digital sport and an esport. I think that's, as long as that gap's there, this feeling of emptiness is always going to remain in the esports community, and they're going to be like, "Oh, there's something I don't have." But that feeling of emptiness, let's just remember, that's part of what makes video games work in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that's me. I'm just always going for the easy solutions, right? I don't want to develop all that respect and stuff. I just want those steroids now, right? That's how we become sports.
Yeah, to take the esports steroids, esports steroids like ADHD drugs.
Yeah, I think wouldn't Adderall be the main esports?
Yeah, you would think so. I don't really know. I'm not familiar enough with either side of it.
I wonder, do you think esports players get like substance tested before?
That's a really good question. I want to know the answer to that question.
If you know the answer, just spam it in the chat, and then we'll hear about it eventually.
Yeah, at some point.
Okay, let's move on to this one. I'll intro it, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is a report from GameDaily.biz. I believe they broke this story, or they broke it. They read Reddit and then broke it on there. Where this is apparently the game Control, which is like a shooter, and then weird stuff happens, and then you shoot people and stuff. It's like very stylish and stuff, but apparently they are owned by this like European company, and this European company had to make financial filings, and when they filed their revenues, they had a line item that said money from Epic Game Store, 9.5 million euros. And up until now, a lot of people have been kind of cloudy over the exact details of the deals that Epic offers to developers in exchange for timed exclusivity on their store. So this is the first like real concrete number that we've seen AAA garner from the Epic Game Store. So I did a little bit of back of envelope math. 9.5 million euro divided by 50 euros or whatever amounts to about an advance of 200,000 minimum sales for Remedy and the makers of Control. So Naomi, what should we think about this?
Well, does that seem like an unreasonable number of sales to predict for a game like Control to you?
That seems low, actually.
Right, it's low. Actually, this is a somewhat conservative advance from Epic, right? It's a large amount of money, which will make a lot of people's eyes pop out, especially people who are like heatedly embroiled in the like, is Epic terrible? Yes. Is the Epic Game Store the worst thing that has ever happened? No. Right? So if you want to know what to think, there you go. But yeah, so it's like, oh my God, they're bribing developers with these huge amounts of money to make exclusives, right? But giving a developer an advance of 200,000 copies for a game like Control, which is very expensive to make, has to sell a large number of copies.
Like millions.
Yeah, millions of copies, right? It's really not that weird. As if you don't know what an advance is, it's just money that a publisher gives you up front, and then you don't get that money for that many sales, right? So for the first 200,000 copies sold on the Epic Store, then 505 Games will not be getting a check cut to them because they already got paid in this 9.5 million euros, right? So let's be clear, this is all represents actual sales of the game. But yeah, of course, it's tied into this bigger question of like, oh, is it ethical to have exclusives? Which, I don't know, the thinking around this is so convoluted and weird. People trying to figure out like, well, does Kroger supermarkets have an exclusive on certain brands of cereal? And is that okay if I have to go buy Lucky Charms somewhere else? Like, or like, what about console exclusives? Like, it's whenever I look into like, why are people mad about this? I'm like, wow, people really they don't understand capitalism. And then I can't decide whether that's good or terrible. But some of them seem to actually be wanting to long for feudalism or some sort of monarchy system instead, where like Valve is king. And so I'm like, that's probably not the right direction.
Yeah, that's what confuses me a lot about this conversation, that the ideology here is just totally incoherent, right? If you love capitalism, if you love consumerism, you're like, yes, exclusives are the market working, right? But now there's like some like moral component that we have to do right by like some imagined idea of like the gamer consumer king or something. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, if it's all about the consumer being at the center on the throne, then maybe that's a separate ideology that has nothing to do with capitalism. But yeah, like how do you break into a market where there's one store, Valve, that is sort of dominating most of it? You have to gain some sort of competitive advantage. That's like how capitalism is supposed to work. What's the better alternative to that? Maybe just a state-run game store. And we're laughing because, like, can we imagine another way that things would be distributed? Maybe it's just a completely just like everyone just distributes their own games, which is what we thought it was going to be like in the early days of the internet. You just have your own website, you sell it on it there, you have your own e-commerce solution. But that really fell apart as soon as things started to centralize on the internet.
Good. Yeah. We'll move on to the next news item. The next news item.
Oh.
So the next news item is something that happened last week, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Hideo Kojima tweeted something out in Japanese, but also on Kojima's English Twitter account, there was a translation of this. And there was a lot of conversation about how to take this tweet. And our very own co-host, Naomi Clark, is actually part of this news story. So, Naomi, please enlighten us and unpack this for us.
Wait, so my tweet is in this news article, right? That's true. So
yes, your tweet is literally in this.
I saw this Kojima tweet. People were complaining about it because he was saying what a Hideo Kojima game is. This is the tweet that made people mad. It means that I'm doing all of these things, right? And so I was like, wow, this is a little absurd. Kojima is kind of known for being putting his name all over stuff. Every single mission in the latest Metal Gear Solid says like a Hideo Kojima game in the credits right as soon as you finish a mission. So almost like a parody of crediting. But so a lot of people think he has a huge ego and doesn't credit his contributors enough. There's argument about that. He definitely is trying to be like the Stanley Kubrick of games or something. But then I noticed that in the Japanese tweet, it actually says something different. And it says Hideo Kojima games means he's involved in all of these things. Furthermore, there's some words that are eliminated from the English version. What he's really saying is if the label a Hideo Kojima game is applied to a game, it means that he was involved in early parts of the game all the way through later parts of the game and not just the early parts of the game. And because Twitter character limits, the Japanese tweet had to be split into two English tweets. And in the second English tweet, he said, I won't use that label if I'm only involved in the early parts and not also in the late parts. So why is he explaining all this? My thought was, well, it has to do with his really contentious relationship with Konami and with other types of partnerships he's making where he's involved in some games because he's built himself up into this name, right? So when does he put his name on things now that his name is worth a bunch of money? But it's raised a bunch of larger questions about, well, should games really be all about this one superstar creator? Should we be like a Robert Yang game made by Robert Yang? You're actually a good example.
I do that actually.
Yeah, you do. But you also, let's be clear, like you do pretty much everything in your game other than the model of the dude who's in a lot of your games. Do you credit the guy who made that model?
Yeah, on my itch page, I do credit the guy prominently.
Right, but you say but you still call it a Robert Yang game.
Yeah, partly I guess it's like a Kojima-esque gesture, partly as like a Bennett Foddy-esque gesture, I guess. Even though auteurism is maybe like a pretty bad corrosive ideology to follow in art. Yeah, I don't know why I do it. Maybe I should think more closely about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is complicated because there are countervailing forces pushing against each other. Game companies would really, and publishers especially, would really love it if games were just totally anonymous, just like Microsoft Word. Do you know who like the lead programmers were? No, right? So one idea is you should not know anything about anybody who is involved in making creative decisions about software like Microsoft Word or games like, Hurt Me Plenty or Metal Gear Solid 5 or whatever, right? Angry Birds, right?
Who made Angry Birds?
Well, I know Rovio made it, right? So a lot of game developers take a middle path between one creator or one person's name and complete anonymity by being like, well, we have an identity together as a team, right? So when you say something like, yeah, well, a Fulbright, this is a Fulbright game. If you're familiar with the team or you follow games, then you know, like, oh, that's this group of people, and the group changes a little bit. New people join and things like that. But they have a group identity. That's probably what I'm most familiar with. I worked for many years at Game Lab, and so we had a little logo and a sound logo and everything that was like a Game Lab game, and we were all like, yeah, that's us, right? So that's maybe the middle road. But I think Bennett has pointed out a lot of game companies exist very briefly. Like, is it a good idea if you're only going to you're putting out your first game with a company to just have it be the company identity? Maybe that company will disappear. Like, what's the company that made Sunburn? Do you remember the name? We know the people who made Sunburn. It's like, Tony and Diego and Aaron, but they actually came up with a company name, and now I can't remember it, right? And so those are 3 Game Center alumni, and they created an identity for their game, and I can't remember it now, right? So it's a really tricky question, and you would think people think it's really easy. Like, why not just credit everyone who's involved in the game? Why doesn't everyone get to know who's involved in the game? And then when you get to the scale of a game with thousands of people, like, good luck actually getting recognition for everybody. That doesn't mean that not everyone shouldn't be credited and compensated. But when a game gets turned into a story, the media is the one who does most of this filtering, oftentimes without our control, right? Like, you put a game out there and the media wants to say, like, well, whose game is this? Whose idea was it? And it's the easiest for them to say one person. So the media likes it when there's one person. Publishers like it when there are 0 people, right? And then in theory, justice would be like everybody, which is hard to actually do. But even people who credit or who never say, like Nina Freeman, who's now part of Fulbright, she's also released a bunch of her own games. She doesn't say a Nina Freeman game ever. She actually credits everybody. But people still think that she does, because when news stories write about her games, they're like, Nina Freeman is the creator of this game, and they don't mention anyone else. And it's really hard to force news media to do that. So it's a little bit of an intractable problem, but it's something that's good to keep talking about, because every time you take credit for other people's work, you're being a gross auteur. Yeah.
One question that comes up in my mind in this conversation a lot is like how bands in the music industry, right, often have a front man or front person, right, maybe.
Like Billy Corgan in the Smashing Pumpkins or something.
Right, and then you have to imagine there's a lot of resentment among the Smashing Pumpkins for Billy Corgan taking all the credit, right? Right.
Although I guess in that example, you also have, like, a lot of people know who James Iha is. I don't know, maybe people don't even remember who the Smashing Pumpkins are anymore. James Iha is the Asian member of Smashing Pumpkins. Oh, bad Asian. Yeah, so it's often the more person who's good at talking to the media or the public, more extroverted people are taking credit for more introverted people's work. That happens all the time in game development. There's often somebody who's doing a ton of work behind the scenes who, like, nobody knows who they are, just because they're not putting themselves out there, and that's a really hard problem. I know actually a lot of people who are the more extroverted person who feel bad about that and they haven't quite figured out what to do about it. It's not like it would be great to, like, shove somebody who doesn't want to talk in front of the camera. Some people will, like, mention their collaborator every single time. I know people who do this like 100 times and still it doesn't catch on, right? Like Eric Zimmerman will say, like, this is a collaboration I did with Natalie Pozzi. We work together, and then people will still make the article or whatever about Eric and not about Natalie. And it's just like you start banging your head against the wall after a while. I don't put my name on the front of any games I make just because I don't want to. I mean, I know that, like, Bennett thinks it's a good idea, but I don't care.
Fair enough. We should move on because we have a bunch of other articles to talk about too. Let's talk about, is this one interesting? Do we want to talk about this one?
Sure, we can talk briefly about that.
Yeah, so this is from Kotaku, filed by Ryan McLeod, about Fortnite is getting an update for skill-based matchmaking stuff and bots. So this is about Fortnite kind of like asserting that it's like mechanics and like combat stuff are super important. To me, this is a very big shift from moves that Fortnite has made in the past about like putting on in-game concerts, right? That aren't really about enforcing the game mechanics or gameplay of Fortnite, but more about Fortnite as a cultural phenomenon. So it's really interesting to me to see Fortnite kind of swerve between these different directions, right? Fortnite is a game. No, Fortnite is a culture thing that we all live in. No, actually Fortnite is a game. Fortnite is a medium. What is Fortnite? So, I don't know. Is this interesting? Should I even be talking about this?
Well, I think it's just interesting in that it sort of points out that people think it's different things, right? There are people who take competitive play and advanced skill in Fortnite really, really seriously. And that seems to be part of who's being addressed here. Although the bots are for beginning players. And a lot of the changes I think that they tend to make have been like get more casual new players into the mix. That's usually what anyone making online games has as their first priority, because you have a lot of churn, people leaving the game or getting sick of it. They have to get more new people in. But in this case, they're trying to actually separate out. The bots are help separate out the more new players or the sort of players who are not as interested in being heavily competitive from the like really advanced players. And that's why the matchmaking is sort of accompanying it, I'm guessing. So I guess they're trying to bolster that side of Fortnite. And there's an old theories about multiplayer games and sort of the cultural space of games with a lot of different types of players. Going back to Richard Bartle, who's like a old MMO thinker that we sometimes teach here at the Game Center, suggests that, yeah, actually games are more than one thing. There may be 3 or 4 or 5 different things, and you kind of have to keep them in balance with each other, because maybe you don't want them to tip all the way in one direction or the other, because if Fortnite just doubled down in one of these directions, you could imagine like a bunch of other people would leave, and then maybe you would lose something from the culture if all the hardcore players left.
One question I have from your analysis is, does that mean that maybe Epic has internal numbers that the churn is getting too high, that they have to put these measures in place? Or what might that signal according to the health of the Fortnite community?
Right. So what kind of data or information might Epic be getting that would prompt them to make this move? So I think one of the things Riley says here is that the Season 10 changes were largely about getting new players into the game. So that might be prompted by like, okay, we're seeing a lot of players leave too early. We're not actually able to get them to stay. So they would sort of double down and try to increase their, what they, you know, in technical terms would be like their early retention, 1 or 3 day retention. Yeah, it's just, yeah, definitely. It's those types of acronyms. But really what it means is make the game better for new players so that they will stick around longer and not just leave right away. Now, the Season 11, it's a different approach, right? It's making the game better for new players, but really by keeping them in a little bit of a separate set of features than the advanced players. That, I would guess, is probably more driven by the comments and feedback and maybe sort of survey data from advanced players saying like, okay, what are the problems with the game? Identifying those types of things is more complicated. You have to maybe like watch people playing, look at what's being discussed in the community, figure out like what kind of complaints are just coming from the squeakiest wheels who talk a ton but maybe aren't representative of the whole community. And then you think, okay, what can we do to benefit everyone? And actually from this is almost never happens. If this is true, what Riley is reporting on here, that a lot of players are positive about this, like this last quote here, this benefits everybody, casual players, above average players, and competitive players. That's a very, very strong sign, because usually somebody is really, really pissed off about any kind of change to an online game.
Yeah, good job, Epic Games user research. Looks like it's a home run. Okay, let's move on to this piece. Oh, I don't have a Wall Street Journal subscription. Uh-oh.
We can talk about what this story is.
Yeah, sure. So walk us through it.
Yeah, so this is the Wall Street Journal. You know, one of the most long-running papers in the country, in the U.S., but also one of the more conservative papers in the U.S. has published a story saying there are differences that they claim are brain differences between girls and boys, and that boys actually crave video games more and are more prone to getting addicted to video games, and that's not true of girls, and that girls tend to have more addictive behaviors or get more depressed in response to social media. So it's kind of saying like, oh, boys are in video game land and girls are in Instagram land or something, right? Which is, if it's not totally clear, I'm extremely skeptical about this research because what's suggested by these headlines is not actually what the research says, right? So your brain's reward regions lighting up, that doesn't mean that there's a innate biological difference between men and women. It's just, that's what I think a lot of people would take away from this headline, but that's not what it means. It could, for instance, mean that a lot of boys are socialized to think I should be playing video games all the time, and that maybe video games are being made with boys in mind, and there's a little feedback loop there, and that as a result of being acculturated in a certain way and saying like, look, video games are not for girls, right? Or that there's a smaller percentage of girls playing video games in general, that you actually start to see differences in people's brains because they have different habits. You might as well say, boys have more habits related to video games. Girls have more habits related to social media. Then we might not be as surprised because we know that boys and girls are maybe being tracked into different types of software differently, right? But all the discussion of biology and brains being different kind of suggests that like, oh, actually, maybe girls are just not wired to play games, which, yeah, we can, hopefully the problems in saying that are obvious.
Naomi, it's almost like you're suggesting that gender might be a social construct that is affected by society and is not primarily a biological or genetic thing.
Well, it's really funny. We can't see the end of this article, but there's a scientist at the end who says, look, it's not controversial that there are structural differences between male and female brains, which actually is true, right? You can look at some things being different. Some of that is driven by hormones, washing the brain differently and all sorts of things. But they're saying that in such a way that sort of implies, well, obviously that's what's going on here. That's why some people like why boys like video games. And it's just such a huge leap, right? Because the structure of your brain changes based on what kind of habits you have. And so, if you play a lot of first-person shooters and you get really good at them, you would expect certain areas of your visual cortex that relate to hand-eye coordination to have different structures than somebody who never does, right? So it's just a weird area. And here's my tip. If you read something that seems like it's just confirming common sense, like, oh, of course, now we have scientific proof for what we somehow knew all along is common sense, that girls just hate video games, you should be suspicious and be like, what's going on there? Because there's bound to be a ton of bias involved.
I think playing Counter-Strike made me gay.
Oh my gosh, there's differences in your brain. Counter-Strike activated the gay region of your brain.
It's all the guns. It's all the okay. Next up is this got widespread play across basically every video game news website. But here we choose Kotaku and Gita Jackson's write up about the KFC visual novel romance game. So in case you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard about this wonderful brand synergy thing entering video game land, KFC commissioned some agency to make a KFC themed visual novel, and in this game you eat their beautiful food. It actually looks kind of gross in that screenshot. Also, Popeyes is better, but sorry Colonel Sanders. But Colonel Sanders is also like a chef who's trying to like make the greatest like fried chicken or something, but has to like weigh that obligation with relationship with you. So are you really going to stop Colonel Sanders from like seeking out chicken greatness or whatever? Naomi, what does this mean? What should we think?
I'm really fascinated by the reaction to this game because the initial wave was like, oh my god, my head's exploding. There's a Kentucky Fried Chicken dating sim with like a cute Colonel Sanders Bisho and like there's like a magic dog or some other stuff, right? And then there's a huge backlash to that where everyone was like, this is garbage. This is like an advertising game, which it's obviously an advertising game, right? It's crassly advertising, maybe to the point where that's like part of how they're hooking people. And then Gita's review, I played a little bit of the game when it came out. I think it just came out yesterday or the day before. And I think her review is pretty spot on. Like, it's kind of a tepid game. And it has a lot of, stuff ripped off from other sources, including like Kill la Kill, another anime. But I'm interested in like how this game came to exist. So the developer, as you can see on screen, is Psyop. They're actually here in New York. They make games. They have basically have a game studio. They released a game called Camp Q or something like that, like last year, which it got reviews. It was like written up in Rock Paper Shotgun and other sites, and it was not an advertising game. It was just sort of an adventure game, visual novel. And so they have a group of people making games there, and if you play the KFC game, then they actually have credits of everybody who worked on it, narrative designers, writers, and everything. So what are we to make of this? Well, first of all, like actually advertising and games have a long history of intersecting, especially here in New York, and actually with a lot of people who are involved in the NYU Game Center in one way or another, because it is one source of funding for games. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're making these really insincere games, which I think is part of the problem with this KFC game. It's trying to adopt the trappings of a genre that's known for sincerity, I guess at some level, right? Like really passionate feeling or writing that's like as sincere as romance novel writing gets, but then trying to like sort of doing it tongue in cheek. And I think that was one of the big criticisms of this, that, okay, they're not really taking visual novels seriously. And I'm not sure, I don't think I'm an expert enough to evaluate whether that's true. But I think that's one of the pitfalls of advertising games, is not really trying to make a real game, just sort of half-assing it. And in this case, maybe half-assing it because a lot of the weight of the advertising work is actually being handled by the trailer. Once people saw the trailer, the ad agency's job is done, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, what? And talk about KFC for like a day on the news cycle. So the game doesn't even actually need to exist. So that's actually bad for the game, because it doesn't rely on the game being good or for like real, actual sincere feeling to go into the game. If you are a game developer, and you are looking for a way to get a game made, and you end up making a game for Colgate toothpaste, you could still make a really sincere strategy game, shooter, platformer, or whatever.
Are you pitching right now?
Yeah, come on, Colgate, give us money. No, I'm not. I don't need the advert gaming work, but there's somebody out there who does, right? You can actually make a pretty sincere, compelling experience, even if the money for it is coming from Colgate. The downside, of course, is that you have to probably have Colgate toothpaste incorporated in some way, and that's the tricky part. But you can do that skillfully too. KFC, I think they definitely have some skill here, right? And it's shown by the fact that everyone was like gobsmacked by this. But it lacks a certain amount of sincerity. That seems to be the verdict.
Let's move on to. Oh wait, and then you wanted to tie this to another article.
Oh yeah, right. So
intro this for us.
Well, this is just sort of, yes, I know it's another advertising and gaming intersection. Louis Vuitton now has a partnership with Riot and League of Legends. So I guess there's going to be like a League of Legends branded series of Louis Vuitton items. Are they only virtual? Maybe it's just like you can get Louis Vuitton stuff inside of League. This kind of partnership, it's actually not the first time I've heard of something like this. Like a lot of times with MMOs, there would be somebody would make a partnership, and there would be some, like I guess especially like there was like sports MMOs in Asia have a long history of having like Nike or Reebok or Adidas gear in them. But this is super weird, just because it's Louis Vuitton combined with League of Legends, two flavors that you wouldn't think would go well together. I don't know, like how do you even evaluate if something like this would be successful? I always sort of get the feeling that it's like two people from marketing departments got drunk together and were like, let's do it. Oh yeah. And then managed to convince other people, and then it happened. But I don't know. What do you think aesthetically?
Yeah, to me, it just feels it. Yeah, to me, it these kinds of brand synergy whatevers are much more common in like Asia, but for some reason, I feel like in North America, the brand synergies between video games and other industries we see is usually food, right? Like Doritos and Mountain Dew, right? That crossover makes sense to us, but
not in the game.
Oh, well, hasn't there been? Well, the one that comes to mind is the Final Fantasy cup noodle thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, again, that's an Asian thing, right? It's like somehow really common. So, like, if you go to Japan, there are definitely like restaurants that have special set menus based on whatever like RPG is out at the moment. You know, like when Persona 5 came out, it could be like Persona 5 waffles with like different waffle for every character. Like that kind of cross promo is really common for some reason. But yeah, like seeing stuff in game, I think the way I'm used to seeing it is just some items that you can buy that have some branding on them. And it is less common here. I think maybe the assumption from developers in the US or maybe US and Europe is that people might find that crass or be like, how dare you invade the sanctum of my game space with your gross capitalist stuff, which fair enough. And I don't know. I'm confused about who even is making money here. Probably the answer is nobody, because that's how capitalism at the level of a spectacle just operates. Is people just sort of scratching each other's backs and being like, let's pump up my thing with your thing. And it just goes around and around forever.
Oh, I actually just realized that there actually is one industry that commonly collaborates with the video game industry on in-game items, and that is the gun industry and arms industry, where anytime you see a gun with like an official brand or manufacturer, that is just like any other business or industry where lawyers had to get involved, drop contracts and licensing to feature your Colt M4A1 or to feature your AWP or whatever.
And in that case, so it's confusing to people, right? People would think, oh, wait, is this an ad for the gun that the gun industry is placing? No, it's actually almost always the game companies are paying the gun industry in order to use the realistic gun, in order to sell the game to fans of realistic guns. So there you go. It's just it is a type of symbiotic relationship. We got any more news stories?
Yeah, I think we have one more.
Okay, yeah. So video game companies and climate change. So this is like UN week here in New York. Those of us who live here kind of know it as the time when it's impossible to go up the east side because of all the traffic, and even on the subways, everything is a huge mess. And like sections of the city are shut down because there are like foreign dignitaries and like, I don't know, presidents driving around in motorcades. But one of the things that happened at the UN was that 21 different game companies got together and issued a statement about how they were going to do better for climate change. And this is because a lot, as Cecilia D'Anastasio reports here, consoles in particular rely on mining techniques and components that are manufactured in ways that really are bad for the planet. And so they had this press release that they call Playing for the Planet. Maybe that's also an organization. So it looks like Sony and Microsoft and Google and even Supercell and Rovio, mobile companies who make popular games, are signed on to this as well, and saying all the different things that they're going to do. So yeah, this is probably better than if they didn't do anything. That this is evidence that maybe they're feeling some pressure from their own employees possibly, or from reporting like the other kind that's going on here. People have pointed out before that games are actually a huge part of the ongoing climate catastrophe. But really the biggest problem with games is the amount of electricity that digital gaming sucks down. And actually some of the biggest chip manufacturers, NVIDIA and Intel and AMD, are not part of this. And so it's very incomplete. It doesn't address things like the move to cloud gaming, where now it's actually maybe going to take even more electricity every time you play a game, because it's going to be using even more processing power, but in some sort of giant data center somewhere, right? So this is the kind of thing that like players don't like to think about because it sort of ruins their fun, right? But that just means that ultimately people working at game companies have to think about this. And how to actually do better. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with the electricity situation. Here's my ideal scenario. Tell me what you think. Bitcoin is also consuming an absurd amount of electricity, basically for nothing, or to have a currency that somehow gets away from the government-controlled currency, right? Like maybe in order to try and atone for the sins of the amount of electricity that games are using up, the first move should be to just destroy Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. Maybe we can turn gaming and cryptocurrency against each other.
But how do we destroy Bitcoin? This is a very different newscast now. How do you destroy Bitcoin? You'd have to like attack the exchanges or something. Or like go after people's like digital Bitcoin wallets or something.
You're thinking too small.
Oh,
you have to remember that the game industry also has like people who are like hanging out in the halls of government, pulling strings because game companies have tons of money and they pay people to like do lobbying and stuff like that. I don't really know. That it's probably a pipe dream that they would actually be like, actually, maybe you should look at Bitcoin first. But I could actually see that happening. Honestly, it's something that we're going to have to think about and like come to a reckoning with sooner or later because it may not be sustainable. Like I've been working in this industry for 25 years, and some of our students who are coming into the program now, just started making games and maybe working in the game industry. 25 years from now, I'm not sure that, we're going to be able to do things in the same way with electricity, with hardware manufacturing. So yeah, think about other ways that you could be making games in the future that maybe like exist for a radically different world where we don't have the same type of technological infrastructure. Here's my suggestion. LARPs.
LARPs don't consume much electricity at all, right? It's true.
They don't have to. You can do them with candles, and then they get really gothy fast.
Okay, let's all do gothy vampire LARPs by candlelight. I like that idea. So that's kind of an intense topic. Let's shift. Let's end on a light note. Okay. How about that? So the light note is this other Kotaku article.
Thanks, Kotaku.
Thanks, Kotaku. We're just reusing all your content.
Yeah. So right. So this is an 89-year-old grandma. One thing I always have a problem with in these articles is that they're kind of sensationalized. Like, what? This old lady plays video games? No way. She's shooting people? Like, that's the strangest thing in the world. Of course, that type of article has come out a billion times. And I will note, it's not necessarily Kotaku's fault that they reported on it. This got turned into a news article by reporters in Japan. Oh my gosh, an old lady playing Skyrim? My head explodes, right? But here's what this is part of, really. She's saying that it helps prevent dementia. Like, it's her way of keeping her mind active. And that's something that actually has been a topic in games for a long time in Japan. In part because, Japan has a very graying population. There are a lot of old people there. And one of the things that old Japanese people are the most worried about is sort of going senile, having dementia, having Alzheimer's. I know because my mother's Japanese and just talks about it all the time to me. She's like, I'm afraid I'm going to have Alzheimer's and then I'm just going to be shut up in my apartment and the cat's going to eat me. That's like her nightmare. Those things are not really connected, but it's a nightmare. What are you going to do? And so a while ago, actually, if you remember the Nintendo Brain Age series, that was part of the reason that existed, was to sort of sell it to retirees and tell them like, hey, if you just do these things every day, then your brain will still stay healthy and you won't forget who your children are or other terrible, tragic things like that.
I was just going to mention the Brain Age stuff because I do wonder about, like, I think they have done research on it, right? Because I think part of the whole video games for change thing involved Brain Age briefly, right? Like, oh, look, video games are directly positive on your mental health and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So did you ever come across any of that research or anything?
Yeah, so there's an increasing amount of research on that. It's actually all falling under the heading of neurogaming, if you want to look into it. I think I've heard really divisive opinions on how solid that research is. There are people who really swear by it. For instance, I think one of the things that was fairly substantiated was the idea that playing certain types of game can help block PTSD flashbacks because they sort of take up the same pathways in the brain. But all the research about, like, does it actually help your brain form new neural connections in a way that other activities would not? That I think is a sort of dubious question, and one that there are people who are really pro that question, and there are other people who say, you're trying to like make that into a thing in order to boost your career or boost this research. It's controversial, and in part because Games for Change, the conference that happens here every summer, now has a whole track that's devoted to neurogaming. So a lot of people are invested in it, but there are other people who are like, I don't know about that, but hey, it's worth doing research on. Why not, right? Like, find out what's going on. If I had to guess, I would probably say, probably a lot of things are good for your brain. Some things are bad for your brain, like just being depressed and staring at the ceiling. But there are a lot of ways you can stimulate your brain, and I don't know that video games are like somehow super special. We have to resist video game exceptionalism.
Resist video game exceptionalism. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you so much.
I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so we are moving on to our next segment, which I believe will be with Matt Parker. Matt Parker, get over here. So, yeah, sure. Oh, shit.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. So
They can't hear me at all right now.
no,
Now they can hear. I will know when I was listening to the stream, I was hearing it pop from occasionally into, it was like mono, and then occasionally became one ear. Just later. I probably shouldn't say that on the stream. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Good. Yeah.
So Mr. Parker, if you're not familiar, if you haven't met Matt is faculty here at NYU Game Center. Tell us a little bit about what you do generally, and like what your work and research involves usually.
So at the Game Center here, I primarily teach programming for our grads and undergrads. I am the area head for the programming track. I also teach a lot of studio classes, ranging from just Let's Make Games to Let's Make Games for X. So I do a series called Designing For, where we do designing for museums or designing for impact. I do a lot of work with the much maligned Games for Change conference and
Not
festival.
that maligned.
No, I mean wasn't just maligned, but I believe that games can be a force for good, and I believe that we can all try to make the world a little bit better place. I do think that not all games that claim to be doing good are actually doing good, so I think there's reason for scrutiny and skepticism, and I support that fully, but I don't think that should stop us from trying, and that's basically my philosophy is that we should try to do better, that we should try to make the world a bit better place, and that's why I'm here today, Robert. How's that for a segue? Look at that.
That was a lovely segue. Thank you, Matt. So do you want to do you have anything to set up or show? Or
I wasn't sure how to get it to you. I slacked you a couple things. Was that the right way to
let me open Slack and hope it doesn't open on the stream. Let me see.
I don't think it'll happen. You can hold it over there, right? Oh.
Okay, good. It didn't open. Okay, let me try to open this link. The first link or the second link?
Let's start with the second one first.
Okay.
So I, for about a year now, have been working on a organization that is about fighting climate change. As many of you, that's came up previously with Naomi, I was hoping you would end on that, so it would be like such a smooth transition, but it was too depressing, apparently, to stay on. And that's part of the reason why I decided to start this organization with some other colleagues who I find climate change incredibly terrifying, and for a long time I felt helpless and powerless to do anything about it, and I think a lot of people feel that way, and a lot of people choose not to think about it because of that. Do you ever play Call of Cthulhu, the classic role-playing game? See if Naomi was still here, she'd be all about it. It's basically a game where you play in like a H.P. Lovecraftian world, and ancient dead gods are rising, they're going to kill you, and bad things are going to happen, but you can learn to fight back. You can get powers. That was my phone making that ding sound. You can learn to like powers and spells and stuff like that, but the more you learn, the more your sanity points go down, and you have to make sanity checks. If you fail enough sanity checks, you lose your character, becomes an NPC, you become like a raving lunatic, you can't control it anymore.
Okay.
That's what climate change is like.
Climate change.
Climate change is exactly like that. People don't want to learn about it because it's terrifying, and they're afraid the more they learn, the more they'll go crazy, and they won't be able to stop it anyway. So just avoid it. And I believe we can do things to stop it. We just have to figure out how to make ourselves most effective to maximize our efforts. So that's why I'm starting this organization, the Open Air Collective, along with other people. And basically, our idea is that we are going to find the way to make most people as effective as humanly possible. So actually, if you could open up the second link right now,
Okay.
that's a thing that can happen.
Stall.
Stall for some time. We are concentrating on a technology called direct air carbon capture, which is basically a way to pull CO2 from the atmosphere to make it so that we can draw down some of the emissions that we've already put into the atmosphere. So it's a way of reversing some of the damage of climate change. There's a bunch of people who are focusing on things that are about preventing further damage, and those are all super valuable and useful, but we've already done too much damage, and we are currently doing too much damage, and so we need to find ways to reverse it. And so that's what direct air carbon capture is all about.
So Right now, I've opened up this Unity WebGL thing that helps us learn about direct air carbon capture. So you're using video game technology to try to educate the public and inform the public about this technology, right?
Yeah, I think that's a point that will speak to a lot of parents out there. A lot of people are like, oh, my kid's going to learn how to make video games. What good is that? And I'm like, well, they can make video games, first of all, super valuable. Second of all, second of all, the skills that you learn making video games can be used for a lot of purposes. As I said a moment ago, I do believe that using games for good is a possibility, and so I'm using game technology here to help explain a concept that I think will be helpful to people. People think this is like sci-fi to pull emissions out of the air, and it turns out there are already a bunch of companies doing this already. It's kind of just like a fancy dehumidifier. So when you see the insides of the box, it's actually like there's like 3 things in there. It's not actually 4 things if you count the water pan that catches the water. It's actually not that complicated, and it's pretty achievable. We just need to put funding behind it the same way we've done with renewables. I'm gonna silence my phone.
It's okay.
No, is that how? Stop! I think I'm getting. I think it's like a Slack conversation. I hate Slack. I'm just gonna throw that out there for the stream. It's not good. It's annoying.
And yet you use Slack.
I'm required to use Slack by this department, among other places, including the Open Air Collective, where
Students don't listen to him. Students don't listen. Slack is universally beloved.
Send me an email.
Slack is universally beloved by all the faculty, and we are completely lockstep unison on this issue.
Yes, yeah, agreed, 100%. I'm on your show, so I guess I should do a little yes and action here. So we are starting this organization to try to help people figure out how they can be most effective. There's a million things you can do to fight climate change. There's a bunch of different organizations out there. Personally, I found it unsatisfying that I was like, at a march, I felt it unsatisfying that I was just a number, basically. It's like, there's another person, and they just count the total, and I felt like I could be more effective as an individual if I really focused in, if I really was able to find ways to maximize my effort. And that's why we decided to focus on direct air carbon capture, because there are like 25 things that we really need to get on immediately to stop climate change. And about 20 of them are getting a lot of focus right now, and that's great. We're 100% supportive of cutting emissions and renewables. Nuclear energy was a little controversial. I'm in support of it. But there's not enough focus on direct air carbon capture. That's something that if you look at most of the climate change reports, that there's like new technologies to fight climate change. This is what they're talking about. This is something we need to do to draw down the emissions we've already put into the air, and the 33 billion tons of carbon we're putting into the air every year now. We need this technology in addition to all the other things. So it's no way saying that our thing is more important or that those are other things. And if you enjoy marching or protesting or donating to other causes, keep doing that. Those are all necessary, but we feel they're not sufficient. So you should do those. They're important. We want you to do what we're doing if you find those unsatisfying, if you want a new place. So if we go back to the original website now, I like having Robert as my... if you go to the main page, there's information about who we are, what we're doing. We are officially launching tomorrow. We did sort of a soft launch at the March for Science back in May. We've been working for this about a year. We have legislation that we're introducing to New York State to support direct air carbon capture here in New York State, which we're open sourcing on GitHub, and we're hoping to spark a movement of open source legislation so that it can be cloned by other states to get more and more people doing this. We're going to be doing an open hardware project eventually where you can have your own direct air capture machine. My fever dream is like a direct air carbon capture machine that takes the CO2 out of the air and you put it into your soda. It's like a direct air capture soda stream. Yeah. Instead of buying a canister, you just pull it out of the air and then you put it into your belly. And then I don't actually know the metabolism, what happens there, but it will advance the technology really is our goal. So yeah, we're looking to fight climate change, and we're looking to use you as an individual as effectively as possible rather than just a number. So if that sounds appealing to you, go to the openaircollective.org and sign up, and we will be back to you shortly about how we can help you. Do you have more questions for me, Robert? Should I ask you some questions?
No, I asked the questions here.
I didn't ask, that was a question.
Oh, thank you for asking me that question about questions. I think one thing, since we're speaking to mainly like game designers and game developers, how do you think the game industry or game designers or game developers can interface with this problem of climate change and climate crisis?
Yeah, so I heard the the difficulties that you and Naomi were talking about before about like, I think the ultimate conclusion was to try to destroy Bitcoin was the way that game designers are going to fight climate change. I would argue there's nothing inherently evil about Bitcoin if it was all powered by renewables, which it most certainly is not, and they're actually reopening coal-firing plants to provide power to them. So it is damaging right now. I would encourage our people not to go around hacking and destroying infrastructure. But, you know, if anarchy is your answer for things, I'm not going to stop you, not physically, directly. I think one thing there's a real dearth of, and something that I've been working on for a while and have yet to find the answer for, but maybe someone out there has the answer for, is we need something that creates a paradigm shift. I feel like there's already a paradigm shift going on around climate change. Like in the last year, I think there's been a huge movement in terms of people's responsiveness. If you'd ask even like registered Democrats in the U.S. about a year ago to rank their top issues, climate change would barely crack the top 10. And now I think it was number 2. I just got an email from the DNC saying like climate change was number 2 on the list. I forget what was number 1. So that's a huge shift in people's sentiment towards it. But I think we need more. I think we need the sort of Uncle Tom's Cabin or Silent Spring or Brokeback Mountain or whatever. Like, I feel like there are pieces of popular media that have changed people's perspective on things. You don't think that's happened? You disagree? Will and Grace?
Brokeback Mountain?
You don't think that changed? Like, it was like 3-4 years before gay marriage got passed? You don't think it had some impact? No? None? I disagree. Do you not like Brokeback? Are you saying you don't like Brokeback Mountain? Because I will fight you right here. I won't physically fight you.
We should just stick to climate change for now, maybe.
Do you think it's a bad movie? Wow. Okay, we should do a segment on this later, just discussing our feelings on this. Not in this segment, but I feel like it's a good movie.
Let's talk about gay movies with Matt Parker.
Sure. And what I get wrong about them, apparently.
No, it's fine. Everyone is allowed their own taste, and
but I want to know why I'm wrong.
Movies. It's totally okay if you really like Brokeback Mountain.
I do, but I feel bad about it now for some reason. But I'm not sure why I do, which is why I think we should discuss it further.
I'm not gonna like go after you on Twitter. Don't worry.
Yeah. Are you gonna go after me some other way?
We'll see about that. Okay. Tune in next time. No. Okay, I think next we have to move on to our student guest. So thanks again, Matt Parker, for coming on the show.
TheOpenAirCollective.org. We're going to be at the Marketplace for the Future, which is the sort of capping event for climate change this week, or for the Climate Week in New York City. So if you happen to be in New York City and you go to the Marketplace for the Future, come by our booth and we will tell you more about what we're doing. Thank you for this time, Robert. I appreciate it. I'm sorry if I offended you.
No, you did not offend me. Thank you for coming on. Live television, folks. We need to get Christine.
You need me to get Christine?
Yes, please get Christine. So while I stall for time, just want to talk a little bit more about the next segment. Next segment is something we always want to do on Game Center Live, which is where we have a student come on and we get to know a student a little bit better and maybe even play the student's work and output a little bit to get a sense of who they are. And the student guest I'm looking for is not here right now. So Julia, what should I do? Yeah, you should go find her too. Live television, folks. In the meantime, I guess I'll just open up the chat. I actually haven't been good about looking at the chat right now. So let me just pop that open, I guess. Oh wait, I don't know how to pop it open. Okay, well, if you're in the chat and you're saying something important, I'm sorry. Where did she go? Everyone out there is like shrugging at me because they cannot find the student I was looking for.
Still looking. I saw her just before I came in, so she's probably around.
Yeah, I think she's around.
The Open Air Collective, I guess.
Yeah, more advert. Visit the open.
Should I come in?
Yeah. No, you have class. It's okay.
We can talk about Brokeback now if you want to. Live TV. Let's do it. Tell me what you don't like about it.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
The OpenAirCollective.org website up.
Okay. Brokeback Mountain. Okay, so how about you talk a little bit about why you like Brokeback Mountain, and then I'm gonna update some of the headlines and overlays and stuff.
I saw Brokeback Mountain. I really wanted to go see King Kong, and my girlfriend at the time really wanted to go see Brokeback Mountain, and so we decided to go see both. Was how we split up. Oh, she's here. Disregard. I loved it. She loved King Kong, and I love Brokeback Mountain. Is the end of that story. More on this later. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe next week we'll have that conversation. Cool. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Have a seat. Okay. Do you want to sit a little bit closer so we're more in frame? Okay. Well, the camera's right there. Hello. This is Christine. Christine is a student here at Game Center. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here and like the kinds of classes you've been taking, whatever projects you're working on?
Yeah. So I did my undergrad in editorial illustration, and my focus on like character and visual design, and it's still a bit like wild where this year has taken me, because I think like 3 years ago, if you told me I would be not only like making games but wanting to like do this professionally, I would have been like, what are you talking about? But like here I am, like making games, learning how to code. Some of the classes I'm taking is like Code Lab 0, where you get introduced to Game Maker and Unity. Game theory class, where we talk about like sort of the foundations of like designing games, board games, and like the philosophies behind that. And game narrative, where we start to like take all the components of what makes a game and like create visual novels and walking simulators and things like that. And I found myself liking the Code Lab class a lot. Like, that's my favorite class, which is wild, because I thought coding was like not only my worst subject, but like the one thing that was just like, I start looking at the screen and I'm just like, oh, like everything just starts blending together and I kind of like blank out. But what I want to get out of this program is I want to be able to like just start using like the skills I've learned here and like the art skills I have to start making my own small games that tell like my own personal stories and subjects without really caring if it appeals to like the mass market or anything like that. Like if that happens, then like cool, but like I just don't want to be like beholden to like, oh, I need like this person to do this for me because I can only do like one aspect of like making games.
Cool. Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about how you're taking code, you're seeing code in a new light as like part of your creative practice. And I would just like to say that I think that's a very common experience with a lot of our students, right? Where a lot of our students come in not knowing much code or having much code experience, but as they take more code classes, they learn that it's like just a skill you can like build up, right? They learn that it's, I'm not one of those people who thinks everyone should code and like every citizen should know how to program everything and technology should take over our lives. But I would argue that if you do want to learn how to code, there are resources and places that can help you learn how to code, and it is not totally out of the question. And anyone can learn how to code if they really do want to learn how to code. I think.
So like one of the challenges I had with coding in the past, and like I guess I can bring up a similar experience with 3D modeling, is that like,
Can you hold up?
oops, is kind of like the resources out there are available, but like if you weren't already like kind of within that sphere, like even the answers you get make absolutely no sense. So like my first introduction to coding was my game design final in undergrad, where I had to learn scripting in order to make a very basic visual novel in RenPy. And I don't even really count that as like learning to code, because all I really did was copy paste scripts, but like I didn't really have any foundation of like what the heck did I put in that like made any sense whatsoever. So what makes it click for me here is that like I have like a teacher and like classmates and colleagues who will sit down with me and be like, here are the functions and here are the expressions you absolutely should learn as a basis of like the language that this program is using, and then from there, this is the kind of mindset you need to have like making the code. Like, don't so much look at the big picture of like how this code's gonna work. Just go step by step. Like, first I want the thing to move, then I want the thing to pick something up and put something down, and it's like very procedural. And like once that clicked with me, like it became a lot easier, and it just became a process of like, okay, let me read this down one by one, line by line, to see like what it is I'm like telling the computer to do, which is a lot more manageable than like how I was doing it in the past, where I was just like scrawling through 300 lines and being like, oh my god, like what's going on, why is this wrong, I don't understand.
I'm gonna pull up one of your games, the visual novel you actually made for my class. Do you want to, while I get it downloaded and installed, do you want to like intro us to the game a little bit and what it's gonna be about?
Yeah, so it's a very, very lighthearted and silly game, just about like procrastination, and like the sort of procrastination where it's like, you know, you're supposed to be doing something productive, but you just end up doing literally anything else but that. I decided to go a bit lighthearted, pretty lighthearted in this case, since I kind of want to take a step back from talking about the more serious or kind of constructive discussion types of work that I tend to do when I'm learning things, and I just wanted it to just have a little fun with it. So it's pretty silly, but it also does touch upon like where I was like the year before I came here, where it was like things weren't really going my way, and as I was struggling, just like trying to make ends meet, my productivity went down, and like while I knew I was supposed to like apply for jobs or do work output, I ended up just like playing Overwatch all day, and I just didn't really care, but I also felt bad that I just played games all day, and so I just want to like kind of poke fun at that a little bit. My first time using Unity, like we're seriously using Unity, and my first time using Fungus, so in this instance I didn't really push too hard on like some of the new mechanics, because I was like working with two programs that I wasn't quite familiar with. So like next time around I already have ideas, and I'm already starting to draft what I want to do that starts being more involved with like some of the features. But this was a very good entryway into Unity, which is a program that intimidates me, because when I see a lot of buttons and words on the screen, I start to like shut down a bit, because it's like I don't know where to start. So this was a nice little segue into Unity, which we're going to be working with next project, which I'm also excited about.
So how would you like to do this? Would you like me to play and then you to give commentary, or would you like you to play and then I talk? Or
you play.
I'll play it? Okay.
You're my play tester.
Okay, awesome. You're going to see a play test, live play test on camera, folks. Okay, here's the mic then.
All right.
Walk me through some of this that we're seeing on the screen.
Well, I promise this is not my room. This is a random image. So yeah, you're just a little intro. Like, it's 8:00 a.m. There's your little character there. Stayed up late again, doing who knows what, probably just video games, because that's what it is.
Did you do the character art on these?
I did, yes. Yeah, I did the art that you're gonna see.
Oh gosh. So now we have 4 options, right? I can choose to procrastinate with Overwatch, Nintendo Switch, I can take a depression nap, or I can read some fan fiction.
I think what you should do is play Overwatch because it's a fun game. Made by this company called Blizzard. I don't know if you guys heard of them before, but they make some really good games that are really addictive.
Okay, so it looks like I'm gonna play some Overwatch. Oh gosh.
It's also loot. I don't buy loot boxes, but it is the loot box game. That's why you play Overwatch.
I mean, loot boxes are perfectly like everyone has their reasons for buying whatever they want, I guess, right?
I mean, they get you if it's like $5. No, this is not a. I'm griefing. I'll admit I get a bit of a grief. The people who play Overwatch will understand. I also don't know why I keep playing the game. I find myself being more angry at Overwatch, and I still play the game. And then I ask myself, I spent 14 hours being mad at Overwatch.
Who do you main in Overwatch?
My most hours is in Mercy. Next is Diva and Reinhardt. I'm mostly a heals and tanks main. Which usually means I get yelled at when the team dies because they try to 1v6 everybody else. But, yep, and now you're starting a new day, and maybe this time you should choose, let's see, go to Nintendo Switch. That's a fun one. Look at that. If you guys don't know what Bad Rats is, I don't think you guys are really gamers. I'm just putting that out. It's a cultural classic.
I don't know what Bad Rats is.
Oh, that's so sad.
Can you tell me what Bad Rats is?
Bad Rats is a classic bad game.
Wait, but then we can't even play it in your visual novel.
Holiday. Pick a holiday. So
Okay.
Bad Rats is a classic bad game that was popularized in an era of Steam where you could not get refunds for getting bad games.
Oh.
So people would like troll each other by like gifting like 5 copies of Bad Rats, and you couldn't do anything about it. So you were just stuck with this bad physics game about rats trying to kill this cat in a microwave. Like, it's a very, I mean, they're bad rats, I guess, but
I'm pro trolling Steam gamers, I think, though. So I think I'm pro Bad Rats, I think.
yeah, but you missed it. Like, you can do refunds on Steam now, so the significance
Oh.
is gone. I mean, this is, I drew that image when I wanted to do a more serious image, but I saw that my desktop was like lagging like crazy because Unity was killing my computer. This was all I could muster. I call it butt cat. I tried to do the emoji, the peace sign, but like it was lagging so bad that like the end of the like hand line kept going across the screen, like, and it took like 15 seconds for that to complete. It was not. That was when I knew I should probably turn my project in and stop.
I mean, it's good that you're feeling out the scope of your project as you work on it.
Yeah, I think it was the images I was starting to put in. I didn't really look at how many, like, how big they were. Google Images is kind of a basket case for that. Let's see. We have not done
Which one should I do?
Depression Nap. That's my other favorite one. It's the one where you sleep.
Agenda to just sleeping. You know, sometimes you have one of those days, right?
Yeah, but a Depression Nap is like the worst one because you wake up and you have a headache.
Oh.
And you feel like garbage, and you're just like, maybe I should nap again, and it doesn't get better. You just sit there being like, maybe I should stop, but you're so lazy, you don't keep taking a nap.
Oh my god, what should I do though? How do we get out of this funk? Do we
Apply to
sleep more?
jobs.
Okay.
You can't sleep more. You gotta.
Okay, let's apply to jobs.
You still feel like garbage.
Oh no, oh poor cat.
You felt good though. You did something productive.
So, but the narration does feel like very like relatable. I think, right? We all get in these funks. We all get in these things where, like, oh, how do we get jobs? What should we do to
Yeah.
get these jobs? I can't get these jobs. I want to go to bed.
Yeah, like this, like the process behind this, I should have sent you like my original flowchart. Got a little pretty heavy because like as much as I like to joke about it, it's like, well, like during my undergrad, like I was extremely productive. I didn't need planners or goals because I was like doing them already by default. And then like after undergrad and after like struggling with employment, like it all just went downhill. So like I make light of it, but it's a really, really bad feeling and a really, oh no, that did not happen.
Uh-oh, I think there's a bug.
There is a bug. Well, that's great because it was just a cell phone with screenshots of the. I mean, I guess you can be looking like this when you read fan fiction. Like, I can't tell you what people's moods are.
But I mean, the visual presentation on this is like pretty like very like polished. I like how you have like different fonts as we switch between different like voices and characters.
Yeah, I keep doing this. I'm bad at this. Yeah, I've definitely been a lesson of I think scope. I like in a normal time when I didn't have like other projects in, I probably would have gotten like a lot more visuals in. But I learned my first lesson, which is never assume you have the time you think you have for your project. So the scope kind of crouched in, and I'm just like, oh well, how can I still fit the visual style I was going for, but like not have to invest as much time like making custom art assets. But like luckily I made it humorous, so like I can get away with like putting in my reaction and meme images from my folder. You can do another Nintendo Switch one, and then we can do Splatoon 2. That's my favorite game. What is going on?
I think we're stuck in cat mode.
We are stuck in cat mode. We should maybe start the game, like close the game and then like open it again.
Okay. Wait, I think we're running out of time now.
Oh no, well, what a way to end it. I guess that depression nap just kind of affected everything.
No. You know, there's actually a very powerful example of procedural rhetoric where when we are the depressed cat, that like overshadows everything, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't do anything else.
Yeah, that's definitely what I was going for. I love that. I love
Julia, can you get Bennett? So yeah, I think it's actually a very effective metaphor, and in a way, it's almost like the games are like reaching out, right? The Ghost in the Machine is like helping us understand this like situation and state of mind, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, like if you're depressed, no matter what you do, that's always there. But on the other hand, you can't even see the work I did for my. I guess no one wants to see Bad Rats 3, the Switch edition. Although I might, if the dev is here watching, because they announced Bad Rats 2 at E3. That's how much clout they had. So maybe they're seeing this and say, maybe I should make Bad Rats 3. Don't buy Bad Rats. I mean, you can.
Do you hear that, Bad Rats developer?
7 cents, I think.
Make sure you contact Christine. Christine wants a free copy.
It's free games. Like, I'm not gonna turn down free games.
I'm gonna get you a Steam key. Okay,
Alright.
2 Steam keys, 1 for me too. Okay, thanks for joining us, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, have a good rest of your day, and peace out, I guess. Bye. Okay, so now we'll move on to our next and final segment. Today we have a special guest. He's a member of the NYU Game Center faculty, although this semester he's on sabbatical, so you might not see much of him during this semester. But here, he'll be on camera, so you can feel a connection to him through your screen. That's just as good as an in-person relationship, I think. So please welcome Bennett Foddy. Yay, Bennett Foddy, yay. That's applause. So, Bennett, please tell us a little, for the viewers who aren't familiar with you for some reason, please just tell us about some of your work and practice while I fix up some of the OBS stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, my name is Bennett Foddy. I'm from Australia originally. Before I became a game designer, I was originally an academic philosopher. So I have a PhD in philosophy, and I guess I got into game development while I was procrastinating from grad school in philosophy. Eventually, one thing led to another, and now I teach game development, digital game development, much like Robert. And I'm still making games as well. That's the other thing that I'm doing. I don't know. What else should I say about that?
Okay, so yeah, if you're not familiar, Bennett's made Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, QWOP, GURP, Sports Friends, all amazing games that are very much about, like physics and like moving around and stuff like that. So Bennett, while I try to load up, maybe like queue up Nuita or something, do you want to talk and tell us a little bit about what you're doing like right now? Like, what is sabbatical anyway? If you're not familiar with what the word sabbatical is, we should learn a little bit about that, as well as like, yeah, how you're spending your sabbatical.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when people think about a sabbatical, they're thinking about, like a humanities department or something like that. There's like an English professor who has to finish a book and has been procrastinating writing a book for many years. And on sabbatical, it's their opportunity. They don't have to do any teaching. So they go off to a cabin in the woods by a pond, by Walden Pond, and they spend a semester just sort of not being interrupted by anything, just writing a book. For us, it's a little different. So there are members of the faculty at the Game Center who write books. I know Frank Lance, the chair, has a book in progress, but Naomi has a book. Eric, a very famous book. So for some of us, that might be what we would be doing. But for the rest of us, instead of research, instead of writing, we're doing a kind of broader creative practice. So for me, it's making games. I'm focused on making games and just not teaching this semester. And the reason I happen to be around here and not in a cabin is I need internet, I need a good computer, like I need all this stuff, all the trappings, I need my collaborators. And so really to do my creative practice, it's easiest to be around the university. What the really great thing about being at NYU is it's really the kind of core of of at least one part of the games community in New York City. It's really a kind of a gathering point for that stuff. And so, I'm working on collaborative projects right now. So most of that's just happening in my office. I'm finishing up with my colleague Matt Bock. We're finishing a kind of what is it? It's like a walking simulator set in an infinite museum, which we've been sort of noodling away at for a long time. It involves a lot of really high tech stuff. It's difficult to get it working right. So that's one thing. I guess I have a game. I've been announced as somebody who's making a game for the Playdate console, the little Game Boy style console that's being made by Panic Corporation. So I'm sort of plugging away on that and getting that finished up. Can't say anything more about that, unfortunately. And lastly, just making a bunch of prototypes. So over the summer, made probably like 6 or 7 prototypes for different games, all of which have been discarded. It's kind of a normal hit rate for me. It's like, I always throw away the majority of the stuff that I start making. But yeah, there's some stuff in progress right now. It's probably a little too early to talk about, but I'm learning. At the moment, I'm focusing on learning new stuff. So I'm learning to use Blender, which is really a basic skill, and then I'm learning some advanced skills too. Like I'm learning to use machine learning stuff in my games, and I'm learning to do network multiplayer programming as well. I'm going to come over the dark side, maybe make a network multiplayer game.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So that's the stuff that's happening at the moment.
So it sounds like sabbatical is just this like fun time in a professor's life when they just kind of get to do whatever they want at the cost of not being able to engage with students as much as they would like to.
Right. I mean, I still am engaging with students while I'm here, of course, and with graduated ex-students as well. But yeah, I mean, 50% of our time is normally creative time anyway, so it's just like a little more of that and much less teaching. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, if you're a Game Center student and you're not familiar with how professors get hired and stuff, one important mandate of our job as Game Center faculty is actually that we have to spend a lot of our time as continuing creative professionals. We have to keep making stuff and doing stuff. We have to stay relevant in our cultural art and form and stuff like that, or else we're not suited to teaching students, I guess, is the statement there, right?
Right. I mean, the way that you go about making a game, even if you're just doing it by yourself, even if it's a very simple kind of digital game, changes so radically from one year to the next to the next to the next. And if you don't stay current on tools and on kind of workflows and even just on the kind of craft, the art side of it and the design side, which changes also equally rapidly, it would be very difficult to teach this stuff. So I think that's part of the idea, is to keep us kind of capable of teaching. And then part of the idea is that maybe through our creative practice, we make the school a little bit of a cooler place to be.
Heard it here first. Bennett, Fadi, cool dude, making cool places. Okay, let's now change to the special guest choice for playing games. So every week on Game Center Live, when we have a special guest, we also want to give that special guest the choice to pick whatever game they would like to play on stream for us to talk about for whatever reason. So for this week, Bennett has chosen Noita, which has just come out very recently, right? I think you should probably play it because I have never played it before, probably. So let me switch over to our other format. I can't full screen it because I don't know if that'll still work with OBS and stuff.
Okay.
So you'll just have to make do with that.
Do you have a gamepad? I mean, mouse and keyboard, is that easy there or right?
I tried plugging the gamepad, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're listening, so you might have to just deal with my really warm keyboard and the mouse, and then just do your best, I guess.
Well, let me say a couple words in introduction first.
Yes,
all right,
please.
so this is a game I was super excited about since I heard about it. I guess it finally went out in early access. Is yesterday the 24th? Is today the 25th? Or is today the 26th? Okay, so 2 days ago, this game came out on early access. It's by a real power team, I guess. It was originally conceived of by Petri Purho, who was the IGF Grand Prize winner for Crayon Physics Deluxe many years ago. He's been kind of working a little bit on this project, I think, for as much as 10 years or even longer. And he brought on Avi, the designer of Baba Is You, and Ollie, the designer of the Swapper. So this is really like a group of developers who have made really amazing games in the past, and it's kind of a fusion of falling sand games, which were really sort of popular in the Flash format, sort of cellular automata-based games, and the Spelunky style roguelite. And I have to say, this is a game I've been most passionate about. I've been beta testing it for 6 months or something like that, and I've put maybe 100 hours into this game, and I'm still not good at it. I'm really not going to be good at it with the mouse and keyboard, but I'm going to give you a look at it anyway.
Just try your best. That's all we can ask of you. Okay, so make sure you move your mouse over. Yeah, there. And now, just do your... The menu's really small. Okay.
So you're a wizard. You're a wizard in this game, and you have wands that might shoot something, or they might have other kinds of effects. I'll show you right here that this wand, the starting wand, in a normal game, you've got like a basic gun and then something that fires bombs. And the bomb wand, I want to run away a little bit so I don't blow myself up. You can see everything in the game is, well, it's a little dark out here, but I'll run into the cave. Everything in the game is destructible. Every, as they say, every pixel is simulated. So that's basically You can also kick things, and you have a handy jetpack, which helps to solve the design problem of, well, how do you make sure that the game is still traversable when everything can be blown up? So instead of platforming with a jump, you have this kind of limited jetpack. And you kill monsters, you collect gold. It's a very kind of old-fashioned roguelike structure in that sort of sense, but it all is sort of flowing from physics. Alright, so let me just kind of work my way through this starting area of the game. I picked up a potion. You can see there it's a green potion. It has radioactive liquid inside, so I probably don't want to touch that. Here's a little pool of oil. Now that I've been covered in oil, I'm going to be really slippery. You can see now, like, I can slip and slide all over this. I can wash it off by jumping in the water. So now I'm just wet. That's what that blue drop means. Alright, so I'm going to work my way in. I'm looking for treasure. Like this wand here would be great. But I don't necessarily want to get covered in this radioactive liquid. So what I'm going to do is burn the container by knocking this, blowing up this lantern. It's going to burn the wood, and eventually this glowing green liquid is going to come flowing out and allow me to get at the wand. But while I'm waiting for that to happen, I'll just fight this ghoul. Covered in his blood. And you can see this wall is just about broken through.
So I feel like I would compare this game, a lot of the conceit is like Spelunky-like, but it's also kind of like Risk of Rainy and other like, it's like very much in like contemporary indie like vernacular, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, it definitely borrows some things from two very old games. I think Rogue or NetHack is one. So we're venturing into a randomized dungeon and trying to pick up wands and find out what they do and use them. So there's that kind of classic roguelike structure, but there are other sort of influences on this as well. Spelunky, yeah, absolutely. I think there's also like a very, very strong Finnish sensibility here. So there's an old game that was very, very popular, freeware game from Finland called help me out. Liero.
Oh yeah.
So in Liero, it's like a destructible map. It's two little worms with grappling hooks who are trying to kill each other. It's a multiplayer game. Really one of the most beloved games by Finns. And you see a lot of that in the visual style here, and also in just the basic makeup of the game.
God bless those Finns.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm 1/4 Finnish myself, so I feel.
Are you?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Okay, so I picked up a wand. Let's take a look. It's a really bad one. It's only got this one effect on it, which is called Torch. So let's try it out. It's just burning. So I can use it to set fire to wooden things, but it's really not useful as a weapon or anything like that. So I'm going to switch back to my gun. Oop. And I see over here. So you can see I've become irradiated by that pool. I'm just going to continue on and try to get some spiders down here. Oh, I'm getting mobbed by the spiders. I'm in real trouble, actually. I didn't see how little health I have. Might need to go and wash the radioactive goo.
How are you going to get health?
Well, okay, it's a little bit like this borrows from Spelunky. At the end of every area in the map, there is a health regeneration. There might be some other secret ways of getting health, but they're secret, so I'm not gonna spoil anything for you. But generally, actually, it's really difficult to get health. It's a game about attrition. It's about like trying to manage your risks and not take too many risks and conserve your health. Something which I have totally failed to do in this instance. Oops. Okay, so there's a monster chase. Okay, so this pink liquid is going to polymorph me.
You're like a bat or like a bird now or something.
I'm like a flying lava bee. So it's a bit tricky. I can't really get at this wand because if I get polymorphed into a bee or into something much worse than that, I can't pick things up. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my bomb to drain the pool. You can see the liquid all drains out. That monster will leave me alone. And I can get this, which is a much better gun. So, bouncy green bullets that fire out a bunch. There's even for any given spell in this game, you get a lot of difference based on what kind of wand it is. So the wands have different properties. Some of them fire really fast, some of them are more accurate than others. All of that stuff is variable. So you can get a lot. There's an enormous amount of variation in wands. And in between levels, you can actually edit your wands and try to create the best possible ones. It's a little bit like a deck building card game or something like that. You're trying to kind of find the best cards and also the best containers for the cards, which are the wands, and build the exact set of capabilities that you need to get to the end of the game. So I'm doing so poorly. You can see I have so little health right here. I should probably just race to the exit of this level, but I don't want to catch on fire, so which I did. So I'm probably going to die. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's okay, you tried your best.
Yeah, so it's a roguelike, so that, you know, there's permadeath and you just start again. It's really part of the thing. You go again, maybe you get slightly better luck, maybe you play a little better every time, and you know, you learn a little bit about the systems every time as well.
Cool. Yeah, this also reminds me a lot of like immersive sim kind of discourse and theory, right? About how the idea of like, oh, you get this thing that catches on fire, and then that lights other wood things on fire, and then that does this other thing.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, if you think about the tradition of immersive sims in 3D, like Ultima Underworld and the Deus Ex series, there's usually a reasonably small number of systems that are interacting. You have like 5 different kinds of weapons, and maybe there's like a system of air ducts that you can crawl through, and maybe there's like 3 different things that you can hack. Whereas this is really everything is interacting. Like all of like every pixel on the screen has some interaction with every other pixel on the screen. And, I think that makes it. It's not more immersive, I don't think that's the word I would use, but it's sort of like a more thoroughgoing simulation. You get more unexpected effects, I suppose, is the thing which we like about immersive sims, is sometimes the game goes totally differently from one run to the next, or you learn like a strategy from one run to the next that you never thought of before. So you're always able to play in a kind of a learning mode, in a meditative mode, and kind of really creatively as well. That's really the thing that I enjoy about this. Also, I really like games with a bit of randomness in them. I think that kind of I've been playing a bunch of Teamfight Tactics, the new mode for League of Legends. Everybody criticizes for being like a slot machine, and it is a lot like a slot machine. There's a lot of randomness, and I like that. I don't know. I like slot machines too.
What's your favorite slot machine?
No, I'm not like an expert in slot machines. But you know, I have this problem. Like, if I'm playing a video game like a JRPG or something like that, it's very common that there is a simulated casino with slot machines and roulette. And as soon as I see those simulated slot machines where I'm not spending real money, I just I'm like, oh, like I know I'm gonna spend 4 hours playing that slot machine, or maybe like 10, or like Dragon Quest, the most recent Dragon Quest game. I got stuck in that casino for like 12 hours just playing the slots.
Do you like play Yakuza and like get into like the mahjong parlor and like stay there for hours?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's slot machines in particular. I got really stuck on Dragon Quest 8 slot machines, and also even God Hand has slot machines. Right, like toward the beginning of the game, I was really enjoying God Hand. What a cool game! But then I got to the casino and I just stayed there.
Even better.
Yeah.
11 out of 10.
But I just stayed in the casino playing the slot machines in God Hand and never left. That was it. That was the end of the game for me.
For some of our viewers at home or at school, who are maybe a little unconvinced or skeptical of the value and amazingness of slot machines, like sure, it's like randomness, sure it's like simulation and like juiciness, but like what like really is it? Like what itch does that really scratch for you? Why do you spend 10 hours in a virtual slot casino?
I mean, I'm sure it's the same reasons people enjoy actual slot machines. I think that they are, by design, zero in on a particular kind of pleasure that you can take as a human being, and they offer you nothing except for that pleasure. There's like a moment of being unsure of whether you're going to get a good or bad outcome, and then finding out whether it's good or bad. And I actually think, I spoke to some slot machine addiction researchers at Oxford University when I was working there, and they were telling there was a lab there at the time which was focusing on this, and they were saying that if you look at the brains of people who are playing slot machines, there's this thing that happens to them over time where they start to orient more to like the moment before the win or loss state is revealed than to finding out whether they won or lost. And that's what I feel is like that somehow that's like getting to some part of my brain that just takes pleasure in that moment of like the rolling dice, the spinning roulette wheel. And in fact, I enjoy it more in a video game where money is taken out of the equation. I'm just waiting for a number to go up.
So a slot machine is like pure flow or pure like number sensation or something.
Yeah, number sensation. Something like, it's outcome sensation, uncertainty sensation. There's something about being able to churn through like a bunch of uncertain outcomes being resolved and then just do it again and again and again. I should say, I mean, I don't think this is healthy. It's not healthy, but it's a thing that I definitely feel. I think as a player, you want to be attuned to and aware of, like, what is it that's motivating you? What is it that you're taking pleasure in? Where are the kind of the things that are making you engaged and obsessed with a game? And so that you can avoid it if you want to avoid it, but so you can really go deep on it if you want to go deep on it as well. My life would be going badly if I spent all my time playing digital slot machines for zero money. But I think it's not bad that I do it some other time.
It sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while. So I would have to ask, when will we see the Bennett Foddy slot machine game that the world is clamoring for?
Yeah, I haven't. That's interesting. I haven't really done a game with that characteristic. It's a good point. I should do that.
You heard it here first, folks. World exclusive Bennett Foddy's next game is a slot machine game.
It used to be a thing that people did. Back in the 80s, you could make a simulation of a slot machine and release it as like a commercial video game that people would play at home. And I guess there was the stunt that Zyber Scott did and announced at GDC, where they made 1,500 identical slot machine games and launched them on the Android store.
Do you want to go into detail about this experiment real quick for people who haven't heard about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to do it justice, but they had noticed that there were a bunch of kind of asset flip games. So they're games where you buy like the entire slot machine code and art and everything on the Unity asset store, and you can like publish it really quickly. And they were like, well, do those really make money? That's weird. Like, why would anyone think that would make money? So they made one and like really quickly, and they published it and put like an ad unit on it, and it made a very, very small amount of money. And they're like, well, I mean, it doesn't make enough money to make this worthwhile, but if we made like 100 of them, then it would be making. And then they made like a program that generates randomized variants of this asset flip slot machine. It would have slightly different music that was computer generated, and they'd have like images and logos that were taken off of Google Images by an automated script. So they could just press a single button and it would roll an entirely new, unique slot machine game and publish it to the Android as a story. Yeah. And they wound up having 1,500 games on there, and they were making real money before they started to feel bad, and they shut it down. I think that's a beautiful art piece, just as a kind of a freestanding thing. It's also like horrible. I mean, there's things that are interesting about it. The fact that so much of our economy sort of works in this kind of bubble of stuff at the noise floor of sales. Like, your game can be so bad that nobody will intentionally buy it, or that only people who are extremely bored will intentionally buy it. But that will still guarantee like a few like handfuls of sales. If you have enough games like that, you can start to scoop up all of that kind of random behavior at the worst, most zero failures of games, still get a little bit of sales, and you can start to scoop that up and scoop up more and more of it. That's kind of interesting, and as a kind of art, it's like an art performance, it's really, I think, kind of beautiful.
It's like capitalism is the ultimate conceptual art we can ever create. I don't know. Okay, sounds great. How much time do we have left? Oh, we're pretty much at the end. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Bennett.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Always glad to come on this stream. Once you've run out of guests, I'm happy to come back.
We'll certainly ask for that when we run out of guests, when everyone watches this stream and realizes how awful it is. Okay, well, thanks everyone for watching. Just want to do a quick shout out for credits, I guess. I'm your host, Robert Yang. Behind the camera and monitor is Julia D'Amato. Great student who's working with me on this. The person who did all the lovely overlay art you see right here in the cool logo and stuff is Winnie Song, our newest faculty member. And our captioner, if you've been noticing that we have open captions baked into our video feed for people who are either hearing impaired or just prefer to read captions of what we're saying. That's by Mirabai Knight, the Steno Knight cart services. So thank you very much, Mirabai, for captioning all our bullshit and pointless gossip. I think that does it. Next week, I don't know. I can't tease anything because I haven't planned next week. But next week, it'll probably be good. And we'll have another special guest and another student to meet. And it'll be super fun. So thanks for tuning in. And see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Wait, how do I turn this up? How do I hang up? How do I hang up? Oh my god!